Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Weather Center Live. To tell you the truth, these live streams and these evening discussions are more or less blurring together. I feel as if I've been seeing you guys consecutively for the last several evenings and mornings, for that matter, talking about Hurricane, Tropical Storm, Debby. Very soon, hopefully, Debby will be getting up out of our big picture. She is back over land and beginning to weaken. Never really quite picked up a lot of steam over the last 48 hours trying to marinate over the Gulf Stream waters off the South Carolina coast. We have even more to talk about as we get further and further into the tropical Atlantic season beyond today and going forward. Happy Wednesday evening. It is August 7th, 2024. It is 8 o'clock in the evening Eastern Standard Time. As the title of this live stream implies, Atlantic is headed towards the peak of the hurricane season. It is finally going to become uncapped. And if you haven't already noticed, the MDR is definitely looking a lot more healthy, a lot more robust, and the rest of the pattern is pretty much good to rock and roll. If you notice, before we look at any specific features, look out across the Atlantic Basin. There really isn't anything staring us in the face in terms of a tut low, an upper tropospheric trough, anything to potentially enhance our shear, anything major in terms of weather anomalies coming off of North America or over the central Caribbean Ocean, getting into our actual tropical Atlantic Basin. So we're not only going to wander into a bit of speculation territory, but we're also going to do some long-range forecasting, because right now is what we need to be doing to get ahead of what's coming after we get past August 15th. So once again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining me tonight. I see the chat is popping off. Remember, folks, if you're brand new to the channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. If you haven't done so already, let's give that like button a little nudge. Let's get this information out there. We're going to need to get it out there in haste, because the Atlantic is only going to give us a couple more seconds to breathe before we get started with everything. So we're going to switch over to a different AOI, and the reason we're actually looking at Canada and the upper half of the United States is because this is what a lot of us in the forecasting department is going to be obsessing over the next 7 to 14 days as we go through time. What happens over Canada and the upper United States is going to pay dividends in terms of what occurs over our Atlantic tropical basin, not only with our first tropical feature that is more than likely to develop. I'm surprised we haven't had another area of interest stamped on the National Hurricane Center homepage just yet. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow, but it's looking more and more likely, not possible, not a potential, but more or less likely that we will be seeing Ernesto in the immediate future. So I wanted to just take you through for maybe 60 seconds. That's all I'm going to give myself. We have an upper low moving across through here. We have another upper low moving across the west coast, off the coast of California, the Pacific Northwest. We have an unstable / mature system working its way through Alberta, Manitoba up here. Or actually, I believe that's actually Saskatchewan and Manitoba up here, headed towards the Canadian-United States border. And then we have more cold air sinkage occurring up over James and Hudson Bay, the upper territories of Canada. And the main reason I'm bringing this up is not for any kind of fall or winter forecasting, but this cooler air socket up here over Canada is what is going to dictate more or less our long wave pattern, our Rossby pattern over North America, which will then translate into the Atlantic Ocean. And then obviously you see this elongated appendage here of not only frontal activity and jet activity, but moisture being pulled up from the northern periphery of tropical storm, what I would consider tropical storm. I mean, not tropical, excuse me. What's going on tonight? Subtropical storm Debby. I'm sorry, guys. I cannot word again for some strange reason. Here we are looking at a close-up water vapor shot of Debby. I personally believe we have moved into the subtropical phase. We saw a little bit of some tropical re-intensification while it tried to marinate over the Gulf Stream waters just off the immediate coastline of South Carolina. The center is back over land. You can see it postured just off the coastline, off the shore there, moving inland over South Carolina, the eastern side of South Carolina, with some wicked convection occurring on its north side. Now, I want you to pay close attention to the structuring of this feature. Even if it is the water vapor satellite shot, you can more or less identify where the bulk amount of our thunderstorms thunderstorm activity is. Here's our naked center for all intents and purposes. In fact, it looks like right there is where that low-level circulation is, or mid-level circulation, since this is the mid-level water vapor satellite shot. But then look at all this moisture activity to the north, all the moisture marinating over the warmer waters of the south. We have that good old cheeseburger imagery once again that we love to bring up here on this channel. We got a nice Debby burger sitting off the mid-Atlantic, or I should say sitting over top the mid-Atlantic in the southeast United States, and that's primarily why it really didn't undergo as much intensification over the last 24 hours. A lot of us were impressed. It went from 45 miles an hour to 60 miles an hour fairly quickly before making landfall once again in South Carolina, but that was about it. And this thing's going to rapidly transition from a tropical feature to a non-tropical feature, especially as it ingests more of this dry baroclinic air up towards the north. It's lost all of its lifeline and is not going to come back off the coast. Debby is going to be a remnant low within the next, hopefully, 48 to 72 hours. And a reason it's so muggy down here in the state of Florida, I've been seeing a lot of the broadcast meteorologists over on X, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, YouTube channels alike, mentioning how the humidity and the heat index were so hot and so high here in the state of Florida today. Well, the dry air has diminished. It is now off our west coast in the Gulf of Mexico, and much of the peninsula is experiencing lots of great moisture in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere. Our relative humidity is through the roof, and that's going to remain that way for the next couple of days, if not for the foreseeable future. Here's a look at the National Hurricane Center homepage. As you can see, they have dropped our area of interest in the Caribbean Sea. Like I said, I had stopped paying attention to that for the last almost 3, maybe 4 days at this point in time. There was no development likely. It looked like models were perking up to it, but not a whole lot, unfortunately, and we've lost it now. It is now over the Central American landmass out there, presenting us with lots of thunderstorm activity out there for the likes of, come on, mouse, what are you doing? You can see all this thunderstorm activity over Honduras, Costa Rica, and Nicaragua pushing almost due west at this point. You almost can't see the wave axes at this point because it's now embedded in our Pacific monsoonal trough that runs pretty much west to east like so, with a little bit of kinking in it as you get closer to South America and Panama. So, with that being said, let's go back to the National Hurricane Center's homepage if my mouse wants to play along. I honestly want to say this is my prognosis over not only the next 7 days, but the next 14 to 21 days, pretty much the rest of August. We are about to embark towards the full extent of the peak of the hurricane season, and I would fully anticipate that we're going to see 1, we're going to see 2, and we're going to see 3 AOIs here very soon over the next 2 to 3 weeks for sure. That is for sure what's going to be happening very soon. And we're going to have to track these very closely because if the first one does not end up hooking out, or I should say if the first one does end up hooking out at the last second, it's going to be the second and the third wave coming off of Africa. And today, to tell you the truth, at 12Z, all of our models have immediately perked up. They've definitely picked up something in our dropsondes, our radiosondes out there that help to ingest our upper air pattern, not only across the United States, but what data sparse area or data sparse observations we can pull in over the Atlantic Basin, across the atmosphere for the Northern Hemisphere to its entirety. And you'll see, I'll show you. So what I'm going to show you next, and I'm actually going to go ahead and shrink myself down a little bit. I'm going to go very tiny. Honey, I shrunk the kids mode, basically. And the reason I'm pulling this up is on the top portion here, we have our 500 millibar geopotential heights, or our 500 millibar level for North America, brought to us by the Euro. Then on the right-hand side, we have our 500 millibar heights for the GFS. Down in the lower left here, I know it might be difficult for you guys to see, especially if you're watching on a cellular device. Down here, we have our 300 millibar jet level winds brought to us by today's European update at 12Z. And then down on the right, unfortunately, the GFS does not offer us a 300 millibar level. I can either go to 250 or 500, so I figured I'd go down to 500 millibar winds to determine the full extent of our upper air pattern. Where I have it paused right now is why it is we need to pay very close attention to the first feature, for sure. Because if you look, we have a pretty hefty difference in our overall upper air pattern, and I'm going to try to very carefully step you through it. If you notice, I don't have as many panels pulled up tonight because I want to try to explain to you guys what it is that we will be carefully analyzing, not only here in the Weather Center, but across the meteorological community as we prepare for the I'm going to say it, the potential onslaught of tropical waves, tropical cyclones coming off of Africa, and I'll show you. I'm not just making it up. Our models have really cranked up. Maybe not 0 to 100 just yet, but they're definitely going from 0 all the way up to about 50, 60. And we're not at 100 just yet. We don't have 100% confidence signals for multiple systems. We have a very confident system we have a very confident signal for our first system. We have a decent signal for our second system, and we're starting to slowly pick up signs that a third one may be on the way just upstream of that. So first and foremost, we're going to dissect the European model. If you guys look at our 500 millibar heights, first and foremost, crash course, heights in the atmosphere typically indicate the presence of jets, typically indicate what your temperature profile looks like as you vertically ascend your atmosphere. Lower heights, and I use the analogy rubberized or plastic materials in your car, on the outdoors, exposed to the elements. Rubber and plastic in heat, they expand. Rubber and plastic in the cold or the cooler weather, they shrink. So you can more or less look at your height charts pretty much the same way. When you have lower heights, you have cooler air. When you have higher heights, you have warmer air. And right out of the gate, if you look over the eastern United States, there's a huge difference between the long wave trough axes and actually over western United States as well. We don't have nearly as strong of a sharp or mid-amplitude ridge over western Conus parked over the Four Corners area driving our monsoon out there in the southwest. But we also don't have as strong of a long wave trough over the eastern half of the United States. We have a very positively tilted long wave trough. And essentially, to take you through the phasings of a long wave trough, you have your positive phase, your neutral phase, and then your negative phase. The positive phase means we're just getting started. It is just getting into the stages of deepening and advecting or pulling down cooler air, pulling the jet down, and responding to maybe some cooler air in the mid to low levels of the environment that is sinking towards the equator. That's what creates a trough. The trough is your temperature profile sinking down towards the south, and as a result, you can see your heights respond by bringing in that classic north to south orientation. Your jet responds because the jet is driven by your temperature gradient. So as that cold air comes south and bullies the warm air to its south or its equatorward side down towards further into the south, you're going to see the trough digging in. And as a result, the atmosphere has to respond. You're going to have ridging building up on either side. And with a positive trough or a positive tilt, you're only beginning to develop your trough. So you don't have a lot of cold air, you don't have a lot of influence, you don't have a lot of divergence, you don't have a lot of lowering pressures or instability on the leading edge. If you look and flip the script to a negative trough or a negatively tilted trough, you have a ton of cold air. This thing is punching towards the southeast, the east and southeast. And that's why a lot of us meteorologists, we get a little concerned during severe weather season when we have a negatively tilted trough, because that means we have a very good push of cold air, lots of rising motion on the leading edge, lots of lowering pressures, lowering heights associated with the trough, and probably very good temperature discontinuity. You can see it coming 1,000 miles away. And as a result, if you look at the Euro, we have a neutral trough. We have a north to south orientation over our east coast. And that's why if you look, it's very hard to see from your perspective, but right there's our next tropical cyclone. That could possibly be tropical storm, if not Hurricane Ernesto at that point. And if you notice, pulling way to the north, because along the leading edge of that now north to south trough, that neutral trough with a bit more cold air inside of it, it's going to lead to a lot more divergence and rising motions out ahead of it, opening up that path of least resistance, chiseling away at our Atlantic high, providing that escape route for our system to maybe become an issue for the Bahamas, then Bermuda, possibly Atlantic Canada before getting slingshot back into the North Atlantic. You switch over to the GFS, however, and notice how we have a much broader area of not only subtropical ridging over the Atlantic that extends into the southeast United States, but our trough is barely getting started. There really isn't much cool air associated with it, and as a result, our trough is not providing us with that path of least resistance, which is why the 12Z GFS today had this system coming at our west coast. pretty much like a Debby 2.0, and I can show you guys that as backup. Same thing down in the lower left-hand corner. If you look at the jet stream at 300 millibars, you can clearly see how our jet dips all the way down to the state of Florida. Naturally is going to increase our rising motions, our upward vertical velocities out ahead of it. So our trough is going to find, or not our trough, excuse me, but our tropical cyclone is going to find that area of weakness and right up in front of it and get scooted out into the Atlantic. GFS, there almost is no jet level winds, no jet max, no jet streak, nothing out there for the southeast. You can see we have a weak jet max off of Atlantic Canada, off the coast of Maine, Manhattan, Rhode Island, etc., but nothing down here in the southeast. We're pretty much looking at expansive ridging. So I don't know. I kind of have, I'm putting my cards, I'm not putting it on either model, obviously, because we're way, way far out. We're way far out. That's why I'm going to be just looking at the pattern. I'm not looking at the storm. Notice here, guys, before you attack me in the comments, I know a lot of folks love to talk about how it's so far away. That's why, notice, I'm not looking at the storm. I'm looking at the pattern, because the pattern is going to change more than the storm. We're already very confident that something's coming. So I'm not going to obsess over the physical storm itself. That's another piece of the puzzle. I'm going to look at the pattern, and truthfully, if we're being very honest here and we're being realistic with ourselves, the GFS has kind of been on the ball throughout this hurricane season. It did fairly well with Alberto. It did excellent in the genesis stages of Beryl. It did very good in terms of what Debby's steering pattern was going to look like, and we saw the European model trying to slingshot us out to sea, but the GFS held steadfast that it would possibly enter the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and that's exactly what we saw. So the European model has been a bit more, I guess you could say, aggressive in trying to form these deep troughs and move these systems out to sea. So with all that being said, now that we've kind of given you the crash course on the upper air pattern, here's a quick look, a closer look at our upper air anomalies, or our jet pattern, if you will. You go to the end of the European model, and you can already see night and day difference. We have a toppling ridge axis with winds entering the base of our long wave trough that pretty much dips as far south as the Florida Peninsula. The north and central portions of Florida could get some thunderstorm activity from this if it actually comes to fruition. And then notice how we have even stronger winds helping to amplify our trough, or our ridge, I should say. Gosh, I got to stop dorking that up. Amplify our ridge axes in the Atlantic. And remember, if you guys have been watching this channel for a while, I've mentioned that where the jet goes is going to influence your overall pattern, your troughs, your ridges. Where one thing does something, the others have to respond. So if our trough is digging into the southeast, our ridge in the Atlantic is not going to be as broad. It's going to sharpen up. It's going to move north as opposed to going west to east. Then if you look at the GFS, completely different. We have a diffuse area of jet activity across the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic, the Southeast. There really is no discernible long wave trough. You can argue that there's a very weak pool of cooler air here over the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, but a lot of our polar front jet energy escapes up into central Canada. So a huge difference in our models, a very big difference in terms of our track. And as you can see, 18Z GFS here has our potential cyclone sitting over the Bahamas, whereas the European model at the same time, 0Z on the 17th, already has this thing boogalooing up towards Bermuda. So very big difference. We're going to have to keep a close eye on this. I still am fairly confident, given the fact that Debby's going to help to pull down what cold air we have over Canada, is going to instigate the development of our trough over the East Coast, kind of give us that protective blister and kick this thing out to sea. But if it's not as strong as the Euro is thinking, we might not get the first one, but the second one we're going to have to watch for very closely. This here is just another tool I've been utilizing. I'm not going to spend too much time on here because I know it just looks like a lava lamp from your perspective. This is our tropopause theta. So essentially this is just another tool or another component to show where your cooler air, your polar air is, and your warmer air. And if you look at the end of the GFS, again, like I said, if we don't get that first system, notice what happens over our East Coast. We have a massive ridge. Just dominant ridging beginning to dig in over the eastern United States, the extreme eastern seaboard, and the western Atlantic. So we'll have to wait and see. If we don't catch the first one, we're probably going to catch one of the upcoming waves after that. Let's see, what did I have pulled up here? This is our tropical, oh, that's why I need to pull my tropical depression probabilities. So this is our tropical depression probabilities brought to us by our afternoon European update. You can see Debby's signature is still loud and clear over the eastern United States. Our residual signature is what I'll call it, our residual signal, our dying signal over Nicaragua and Honduras, moving in towards the Yucatan Peninsula, Belize. continues to diminish and continues to weaken. And then out there, as soon as 96 hours, you can see two distinct signatures out there over the greater Atlantic. You go to 120 hours, and both of these signatures ramp up fairly quick. You go to the 5-day mark, and both of them looking fairly certain that there's something going to develop. 168 hours, we have two distinct signatures, and they're just continuing to go up in terms of their probabilities. For our western system, that could play a role in our Lesser Antilles. Been saying it before the hurricane season. Lesser Antilles, we got to watch. Lesser Antilles into the U.S., British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, then the Turks and Caicos. Unless this feature moves a little further off towards the west, we are now up to 60% developmental probabilities. 60%, maybe 65 here and there. You can kind of see a little bit of the blurring of the colors. So you can make a case 60, 65%, fairly confident. You go back to 144, 168 hours, we're sitting right at the same fair amount of probabilities here just to the west of the Cabo Verdes. So we're definitely seeing things picking up and transitioning. And then just back beyond that, as you go towards the end of the run, we have another signature moving off of Western Africa, moving around to the Cabo Verdes, fairly high up on the ITCZ, a fairly high exit region. I don't really think that's exactly what's going to happen. We're probably going to see this dip further south with our African easterly jet coming across Central and Western Africa. You can see it plain as day if you look at a 200 and 500 millibar wind chart coming off of Western Africa. That's going to keep our waves down here between 10 and 15 degrees. I really don't think we're going to have any waves coming off at 20 degrees latitude. Really don't think so. You look at our tropical storm probabilities. Tropical storm probabilities are definitely going up for our Bahama friends, for Bermuda, for the Greater Antilles, and the Lesser Antilles to an extent. I'm not too sure if we're going to get development off the west coast or off the east side of our Lesser Antilles. The Icon definitely thinks so. The GFS, the Happy Hour 18Z, the Weenie Run as I like to call it, thinks we're going to have cyclogenesis before that, but that's going to be a tough call. We're going to have to wait and see. You look at our ensembles, and the main reason we're going back to this two-panel overview, whoops, I just realized I left myself tiny. I can go ahead and bring myself back up. There you go. I can unshrink myself. So I'm bringing up on the 12Z on the left-hand side. These are both 12Z runs. 12Z on the left is today's run. Yeah, on the right-hand side, we have yesterday's 12Z run. And the reason I bring this up is we're just going to go all the way through the loop, and I want you to notice the distinct difference here. The very distinct difference here. And that's why I encourage you guys, even though we are fairly confident at this point, it looks like there's still going to be change. We're still far enough to where we could see some very rapid adjustments. We've already been taught that lesson this hurricane season, both with Beryl and now Debby. Both of those systems taught us some very valuable lessons in terms of locking in our forecasts too early. But all I'm trying to do here is raise awareness that we are not out of the woods just yet. You look at 12 Zulu yesterday, and we have not necessarily a bona fide fish storm. Remember, the textbook definition of a fish storm would be a tropical cyclone that hits that 60 degrees west longitude line and then ricochets off of it, and it doesn't cross 60 west longitude. So technically, neither of these ensemble suite solutions would be considered a classic textbook fish storm. But again, if you look, a large majority of the eastern seaboard and our good old state of Florida is off the picture, off the spectrum for 12Z yesterday. You look at 12Z today, and all of a sudden, the Carolinas up the eastern seaboard and a large majority of us here in Florida need to be paying attention to this. So we had a marked shift today in our ensemble agreement. The ensemble suite pushed well off towards the west. You can see that that's probably in response to our upper anticyclone here, our high pressure trying to back build towards the west-hand side of the chart, whereas here we had pretty much up and out due north like Franklin did last hurricane season. So we'll have to see. We're going to keep an eye on it. I'm not locking in any kind of impacts just yet. If you look at the chart here, this goes all the way out to the 22nd of August. I know time has been flying by, but we're not trying to rush it any more than we already have. And again, if you look, yesterday at 12Z, we had a small, modest signal in the MDR. Now out there in today's run, we have even greater signals that something could try to sneak in under the radar after Ernesto. So Francine could be hot on the trail there. Here's a look at our 12Z GFS ensembles. You can see the GFS finally showing a pretty distinct signature for not only one system, but then two. Especially that second system back behind it here has a lot of ensemble agreement coming off the west coast of Africa. So again, for folks out there saying this is the hype train, You can't make this stuff up. And climatologically speaking, this is right about the point where we are at the precipice of tipping the balance into where we will start to see organization. Now, as you can see, we have a huge fork in the road, so there's still a lot of model adjustment to be had here. You can see that obviously these ensembles would indicate a stronger trough coming off the east coast, more cold air coming out of Canada, helping to reinforce our positive PNA pattern and weaken down the NAO pattern over the North Atlantic. But then you have also these ensemble members that do have a stronger solution and a more zonal pattern over the United States and the Atlantic, and as a result, we see it drift a bit more towards the west. And then obviously this is going to be an interesting feature to track. The GFS ensembles and the GFS deterministic are indeed finally showing multiple cyclones on the same model run. Here's a quick glance at our 18Z. Let me see if 18Z is all the way in just yet. You can see 18 Zulu has quite a fair amount of ensembles doing the same thing as the European model. Bringing it further towards the west with a bit of a stronger trough, taking our stronger members up and out, possibly playing a role in the mid-Atlantic or the northeast coastline, Atlantic Canada, and then a number of our other members coming across the state of Florida, escaping into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So we'll have to wait and see. There's a huge model gap, and it keeps a lot of us under the radar for potential impacts. And when I say a lot of us, I'm not talking United States specifically. We got to encompass everybody. We have thousands of people on the board here for a potential target by any of these systems. And unfortunately, it looks like the Lesser Antilles, the Leeward Islands, are probably not going to escape this one. That is probably going to be our dead-on, more or less, impact here before it becomes a bit more of a fork in the road or the disparity increases in not only our deterministic models, but our ensemble models. And a lot is going to be riding on the intensity of this high pressure over the central Atlantic. And if you look, right after Ernesto's signature, you get that second system coming in right there. Pretty decent model agreement that we have stronger members coming across the Atlantic, possibly once again playing a role in our Lesser Antilles and our Greater Antilles. I've said this till I'm blue in the face. Since spring, the Lesser Antilles, all the way from Anguilla, Antigua, Barbuda, down to the South American border, Trinidad and Tobago, and everybody in between needs to be paying attention. Period. And then from there, that's when things become a bit more of a disparity because we have a lot going on and a lot of modifications going on to our long wave pattern alongside short wave features helping to further create a little bit more chaos in our long wave pattern. But on top of that, we have our MJO coming into a favorable phase. The African standing wave is going to be there full front and center, and that's what's going to help pump out these strong waves as they cut across the Atlantic. So a very definitive signal. If you rewind the chart here, I mean, look at that, guys. We have... If this, you guys were saying cancel the, well, not you guys, obviously, you know what I mean, but there were a lot of individuals out there saying cancel the season, but we have members finally firing on all cylinders everywhere. We have... And this is the GFS. The GFS has been kind of broken for most of this hurricane season, at least up until now. We have members everywhere across the chart, so we're going to have to be paying close attention. Here is a quick glance at our UK model. The UK model I'm going to use as our outlier. I'll show you the KMA if you'd like me to, but the KMA echoes the same sentiments. We're looking at development with a possible East Coast boomerang because of a trough axis. The UK Met I'm using as our, I guess you can say, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess our devil's advocate, our wild card model, just to bring a little bit more evidence to the table. And the reason I'm using this as our wild card model is because it only goes out 168 hours. It is a bona fide mid-range forecast model. And what that does for us is it shows us the confident portion of our forecast. It doesn't get to the point where now we're going into la-la land and we don't know if there's going to be a trough there, if there's going to be enough cool air, if our jet's going to amplify, if there's going to be some vorticity to help deepen our trough, where the positioning of it, what phase we're going to be in, all that fun meteorological jargon. So you take this out and you can already see just to the east of the Lesser Antilles, we have one and we have two signatures here. You go to the end of the run, and again, we have two bona fide signatures. We have one that's moving through the Greater Antilles, so this is taking it on a bit more of a southerly track, and this model run does look a little bit more concerning from the UK Met, because if you look, the UK Met is kind of on the GFS side. We're looking at our mid-level flow here over the Midwest, the Great Lakes, moving across the Mid-Atlantic. We don't have much of a trough. All of our strongest flow is out over the Northern Atlantic, and we have a lot of anticyclonic spin going across this area. We have like a pancake ridge out there. And so as a result, I think the UK model is already telling us we need to be on alert for the southeast and the mid-Atlantic once again. We're going to have to wait and see. And then the UK model is also picking up on this very broad tropical potential cyclone out there in the MDR. And then look upstream from there. We have 1, we have 2, and then look at that. We have 3. So all of our models are syncing up. We're definitely starting to see the clearer image of what the peak of the hurricane season is going to look like. It's only a matter of time. Just about every single hurricane season, 2004, 2005, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023 even. A lot of folks don't really like to mention 2023 because it was an El Nino, it was a weird hurricane season. But if you look at the historical data, even for last hurricane season with El Nino on the table, we had Arlene, Brett, Cindy, Dawn, just like this year, and then we were on a break for about a month, and then Emily popped up, and then from there we started just going, I'm not going to say that phrase I was going to say, but we just kind of kicked everything into high speed, and then we had Franklin, Harold, we're all very familiar with Adalia, we had Gert that came back from the dead, I feel like 3 different times over, Jose, etc. So this is right on par with what we saw last year when it was right around the August 14th, August 15th timeframe, if I'm not mistaken. I was looking at some of the historical graphs earlier today. 2021 saw a hiatus from July 8th all the way till August 15th. 2022, obviously, we had that huge latency before Ian smammered us here in Southwest Florida. And then 2023, we had Dawn as we got into the very beginning of July, and then we didn't have Emily until August. So we've actually been fairly in sync with all of our other very active seasons. So I'm not too sure why. I think folks need to look at the record books a little bit more often before they try to go ahead and just cancel the season or claim fear-mongering. Not too sure why they do that so prematurely, but either way, we're debunking that here together as a community. Here's a quick glance at our 12Z GFS control member. I use this as the control member because unfortunately the only other overlay we have is the multi-panel view where we have all the different blocks, all the 31 ensemble members like this. And I'm not going to show you guys that because it just gets too cluttered. I'm not going to show you a whole bunch of tiny little grid boxes. I'm just going to show you the one control member with our precipitable water value. And you can see as you go through time, there goes Debby getting bullied by that trough coming off the eastern United States, moving over the Midwest, the Great Lakes. All this area here is going to be your trough. That's your punch of cooler air. I'm not going to say cold air. We're not in the fall or winter yet, but this is going to be your modifying cooler air from Canada, ripping apart what's left of Debby and pushing her over the ridge that's in the western central Atlantic. And then take a look at that wave train. We have 1 wave, we have 2 waves, we have 3 waves, and so on and so forth. You go slowly through the run, there goes numero uno right there developing. This model run has that trough sticking around and kicks it up out into the greater Atlantic, but then here comes number 2, and then here comes number 3 right hot on its heels, and then there's a 4th right there. There's 1, 2, 3, and then 4 had just ricocheted up into the North Atlantic. And you can see here that the general takeaway is we may not see the first one do anything fun. It might be our first hooray. We can hype this storm up if we want to, but it's going out. We'll have to kind of watch our interests in the shipping department as well as Bermuda and naturally our Caribbean friends. It's not going to be a bust for the Caribbean. Unfortunately, the Caribbean's going to get it. It's the United States that may dodge the bullet. But then after that, we have plenty of waves to go around and lots of fairly decent environment to develop these features. And if you look, we have 3 signatures here, and this only goes out to the 23rd of August. So we have another week before we cross the threshold into September and actually hit the peak of the hurricane season. We're starting to see things rack up fairly quickly, and notice this one's making a run into the Bahamas and the southeast. This is obviously going to change. This is the end of the run, but you guys are picking up the general thinking here. Here's a look at the GFS. I'll just go ahead and go through some of our deterministic model runs just to show you what they're thinking. If you look at the 12Z run here, I believe the 18 Zulu should be all the way in. You take a look at the 12Z, there goes our first system developing right there. This was the iteration that I told you about that was a little bizarre. It actually takes this in and landfalls it on the panhandle. So it goes to show that, truthfully, this is a possibility. If you look, we have decent high pressure nestled in over the Bermuda High phasing of it. We have a weakened Azores High component because of our frontal chain that's coming across the northern Atlantic. But, I mean, this is a fairly doable scenario depending on how the upper air pattern shakes out. And then if you look down the road, we have another feature right there and then another one that comes off just back behind it on the deterministic GFS. So you see that? We have our signature here coming off the Horn of Africa, and then we have another system once again making a very close scrape towards our lesser and greater Antilles with a pretty dominant Atlantic high pressure steering it up and towards the west. Then the wild card becomes once again just beyond that 70-75 degree west longitude line. If we switch on over to the Canadian model is thinking the same thing. There goes our first system. This could be potential future tropical storm Ernesto. And then just back behind there, we have another wave signature that could develop into Francine as we go further in time. Remember, the GEM, the Canadian model, is about a mid to just getting into the long-term future. So it doesn't go out as far as the GFS and the AI European model to show us where our areas are likely to develop. You come out over the Icon. The Icon has been very bullish, to tell you the truth. We have one wave over the Antilles. We have two waves. We have three waves. And you go to the end of the Icon and look at that. We have two systems on the board at the same time. There goes our first one. This could be E. This could be F. And then this very well could be G, according to the Icon model. So you're seeing a trend here. We went from having to pull teeth with these models to get them to do anything in our tropical Atlantic, and now all of a sudden we're looking at 2-3 simultaneous cyclones on the board, all headed generally towards the west-northwest. We have yet to see any signals that we were going to see something similar to the Lee-Nigel-Margot effect that we saw last year, where Lee came up and did this. We had Nigel that kind of split the difference, and then we had Margot do this all weirdly. We have not seen that yet. The general track tendencies do seem to put it somewhere around 60 west longitude before we recurve or keep going. So a massive difference between this year and last year, guys. It goes without saying. It's already been a night and day difference between last year. I had someone who's been repetitively commenting on this videos, and yes, I'm about to put you on blast because you've done it a few different times. There's someone who's been commenting on these videos saying, bust season. How can you say that? Look at the logic here. Let's go out of the weather spectrum and just use some common sense. 2023, we had 3 landfalls out of 20 named storms. The first landfall was Harold. So we had to go through A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then H was our first landfall. After that, we had Idalia. So we had to go a couple more named storms before we snuck in another landfall. Roll with me here. Then after that, we had to go through a few more named storms to get to Ophelia that made landfall in the Carolinas. That was our 3. 3 storms, 20 named storms. Look at the ratio there and look at the differences in the spacing between the named storms. Fast forward to 2024. Alberto, landfall. Barrow, landfall. Chris, landfall. Debby, landfall. And we're only in 4 named storms. Every named storm has made an impact in either North America or Central America as a named storm. I'm not talking about the waves that never develop and move inland. That would be ridiculous of me to classify those as landfalls. No, that's not what I'm doing here. Every named storm has made it across the Atlantic Basin and made it as far west as essentially 80 to 100 degrees west longitude. So I'm not really counting Lee. Lee was way up there. Lee was beyond 60 west, but didn't make it quite past 70 west. So I'm not counting Lee in terms of mainland United States. Yes, technically you could debate that Lee made it to North America, but on the same token, the same principles apply. You look at the named storm list, and we're at the L named storm before we finally get another landfall. We've already gone through A, B, C, D, and every single one of them have ended up in North or Central America. So it already goes to tell you that in terms of impactfulness and beyond 60 west longitude ACE, we're there. We're verifying. We have not busted whatsoever. And it looks like now all of our models are thinking that this, quote, activity that we've been waiting for, I'm not going to say the H word. I've been very against the H word because I think it's been very heavily twisted and very heavily manipulated. I think when people hear the H activity, you guys probably know what I'm talking about. I feel as if because we've said it so many times that the general viewing public, the general viewership, looks at that H activity, H-activity word as we're going to have 5,000 named storms. That's not what is constituted as H activity. I'm going to say it once, hyperactivity. Hyperactivity is classified through a number of different variables. It's not just named storms. You could technically have a active season with 5 named storms, but they equate to very quality ace accumulations, very impactfulness. I know a lot of folks who were impacted in Houston, a lot of folks who were probably hit by Debby, a lot of folks who felt a lot of flooding from Alberto are going to look back and say 2024 was very active because look at the damage, look at the repairs that we've had to make, look at our insurance rates hiking, look at the bodily injury that it caused. We had a few fatalities here in Florida and in Georgia from Debby. So the impactfulness is definitely on another level in comparison to last year. We're only 4 storms deep, and every single one of them has done something. We're not going to see every storm make landfall, thankfully. But I do think, and we've gone over the statistics of it, we've gone over the simple mathematics that have more or less confirmed, and we're verifying that as well. Again, if you want to argue the science, you can't argue the black and white math. And if you guys remember in my notes a long time ago, I told you I did some simple conversions, I did some fractions to ratios, and we concluded that we have a more 1 in 5 chance of a landfall in an El Nino, and we have a more 3-4 out of 5-6, more of like a 4-5 kind of ratio in terms of a La Nina or a cool neutral. And we're living that. Because if you think about it, we've had 4 named storms. We're 4 for 4 right now, which would mean that coming up next, we should have 1 that goes out to sea, maybe 2, and then the next one's going to hit somebody. If our mathematics are correct, if we did our equations right a long while back, I believe that was in June or something like that, we did those equations. And then once again, this is just one last chart. I was looking at the 12Z. We're looking at the 250 millibar chart just because I want to see exactly what happens up over Canada and what happens over the eastern United States to bring our system more towards the north. This first one. So we'll have to wait and see. You can see on this iteration, the 12Z European model, we have a deep trough. We have really good, cool air coming in out of Canada, and I think that's why we're reinforcing the trough here. If you look at the 850 temp anomaly, you can see that cool air coming across the eastern United States and funneling all the way down towards the southeast, the upper periphery of the Florida-Georgia border and whatnot. So we're going to have to really wait and see. We're definitely in a holding pattern, and I think the European model is going to continue to adjust. But where we stand right now, it seems like Ernesto could pose a credible threat to the Caribbean, to the Turks and Caicos, and then hopefully move in between Cape Hatteras and Bermuda. But obviously, we're going to keep a very close eye on that because I'm not liking the trends. I'm not liking the fact that the GFS that has been on the money more or less this hurricane season, it's been fairly conservative this hurricane season. We really haven't had a lot of those phantom Category 5s. We've really been very conservative on the GFS, and the GFS has hit it on the money on a couple of different occasions and actually has beaten the European model. And I'm not liking the fact that we have that huge disparity to where we could see this thing try to move west. So we're going to treat every single upcoming storm as a very, very credible threat. Maybe not very, very credible threat, as an equal opportunity for a threat. Let's put it that way. When I say equal opportunity, we're just going to keep it all in the same playing field. We're not going to go yay or nay this early. We're not going to say fish storm, impact, fish storm, impact. Nope, we're too far away, so we're just going to put everybody on an even playing field on the same pedestal, and we'll assess as we go through time, looking at the big down to the small scale weather pattern. Thank you all kindly for the folks who have donated. No One Warrior, and I believe I saw another one come through earlier. Oh, No One Warrior as well. It actually mentioned season is a bust. All fish storms from here. Well, I mean, I guess we'll see. I don't know if you're being sarcastic and putting donations at the same time. I'm not picking up what you're putting down. Either my brain isn't computing or I don't know. Or maybe you're just cracking jokes. I'm here for it if you are. If not, then I don't know. Appreciate the donations regardless, but does anybody have any questions for me? We're looking a little low in the likes department. I would sincerely appreciate you focus on that like button as opposed to watch. Okay, good. I was going to say thank you. I'm glad that you guys clarified that. I appreciate it. Because I was going to say, if you're here with a sense of humor, I love it. If not, then I don't know what you're doing, but hey, I'm here for it regardless. And I do sincerely appreciate the donations 100%. Thank you. And donations aside, I would definitely appreciate if you guys hit the like button. You know, I love the donations. It goes right back into this channel, of course, but the like button would be much more appreciated just so we can get this information in circulation, especially as we get ready. All right, no one worry. I'm sorry if it came off the wrong way then. I do appreciate that. And thank you again for another $5 donation. I definitely just kind of balling out tonight. But no, I appreciate that, and forgive me if that came off a little snooty, because there have been a lot of trolls on this channel more recently, and I just don't want them taking away from the user and the viewer experience. But that's it, guys. What kind of questions do we have? Question: the Sahara dust may impact the slow development of the storms. Not as much, to tell you the truth. We are pretty much out of Saharan season. And in fact, I had full intentions of showing that to you guys. But if you look at we'll just use the 18Z GFS as a look. If we look at our PWatt anomaly, our precipitable water in the atmosphere, we are very, very moist. Incredibly moist out there. So the Saharan dust, right on cue, has pretty much, it's not vanished, don't get me wrong, but we're definitely seeing a huge fluctuation in our GFS. If I come way back we'll go to July 31st, look at the difference here. Look at how much more dry air we had out there towards the very beginning of August and at the tail end of July. Lots more dry air, whereas if you come to 18Z today, valid at the same time, a far more robust tropical Atlantic, a lot more moisture out there to work with. Do you think Tampa is going to get hit by a Hurricane John Bell? I wish I could tell you, but I'm not going to narrow myself or box myself into a corner going that micro scale with a forecast. Is Tampa on the board? Absolutely. Do I think there's going to be a landfall in the near distant future? Really not sure. Really not going to take that kind of a wild call or that kind of a home run swing here with the base is empty. Let's put it that way. We don't have bases loaded right now, so I'm not willing to swing for the fences in that forecast. Naz, when do you think NOAA, National Hurricane Center, will mark the wave? Hopefully tomorrow. I would hope if we wake up tomorrow morning, if not throughout the day tomorrow, we'll have it marked. I was talking about that with a few of my buddies in my tropical chat on X. I know that general model agreement is right at the cusp of 7, 8, 9 days. But if it were me drawing the charts, and I've been in a position like that, I've drawn a number of analysis charts that have gone out to the internet for everybody to see, for people to judge, for people to post on Facebook. I've been there at the helm for several years, drawn analysis charts for the World Wide Web to see and for customers and viewers to take advantage of. So if it were me at National Hurricane Center putting those charts together and disseminating them to the internet, I'd put it out there. Even if it was 9 days out, I would stamp it on the chart and I would just back it up with my justification, period. And I know a lot of my mentors back in Air Force weather would probably agree with me in putting that out there because of the confidence level we're at. In fact, I would honestly go as far as to do an 0 for 30, truthfully. I would go 7 days, 30% chance of development, and then rapidly increase it if our signal stays strong over the next 48 to 72 hours. So excellent question. I would hope that they stamp it tomorrow. If not, we wake up in the morning at 8 a.m. Naz, what advice would you give for someone who wants to become a meteorologist? Mr. Man JJ, a lovely question because I'm living that testimony right now. 110% education. Education, education, education. And when I say education, I don't necessarily mean a degree. You want to get quality experience. You want to find mentors. You want to find folks that you can ask questions, find forums, do a lot of self-study. The reason I'm always so tired and my eyes are always hurting and I'm exhausted at the end of the day, sometimes just fully burnt out, is because on top of my degree, I'm also studying things that I find interest in and just continuing to refine and groom my meteorology skills. I'm asking questions a lot. I'm collaborating a lot behind the scenes, and that's what helps you become a quality weather forecaster. Degree aside, you definitely want to have a combination of experience and education because textbooks and videos and YouTube University can only teach you so much. If you're actually in the trenches forecasting, you'll garner just as much experience as you will getting a paper degree at the end of a 4-year tenure. I hope that answers your question. I'm not going to go into the weeds because obviously we're on a time crunch here. I'm not going to spend the rest of the live stream talking. I can talk for hours. Fishmania, $5. I'm in Polk County with you. Thank you so much for all the coverage and tracking. Been watching you since the start of the season. Fishmania, thank you very much for the $5 donation. Happy to have you, and we're neighbors. Good to have somebody else here in Polk County watching closely. Do you think Houston is going to get a hurricane or something soon? Not soon, but we're definitely under the gun, under the threshold, under the microscope for something sneaking into the Gulf and potentially becoming a danger. So far for the list, the F, G, J, K, M, and S name storms have been retired and replaced. Okay. I'm actually very curious to tell you guys the truth. My superstitious side is very curious for the I storm. I really want us to work our way through E, F, G, H so we can see what happens with I if the good old Florida I curse is going to hold true again. We had it last year. We had it 2022. I'm not sure what happened in 2021, but I know in 2020, I'm pretty sure we saw it. And then we obviously know in 2016, 2017, same similar setup. So I want to see... Not rooted in science, That's just my superstitious side. I really want to see if we can buy into that. If it's like a timing thing, if it's a historical thing. What's the gist of tonight? I just joined. Isaac Logan, we're watching multiple entities. That is the gist of it. We're not too sure what is going to happen just yet. We're scrutinizing the pattern over the Atlantic, over North and Central America. There's a huge AOR that we're watching for, but we're definitely seeing a uncapping of our Atlantic, and things are going to kick off here very soon. What do you think about Southeast Florida coast this year? Johnny, I'm watching East Florida like a hawk. I really do think we have a setup that could push a storm into the East Coast like Francis, Jean, Andrew, etc. It's a timing game. We need things to optimize and align in terms of our pattern, our storm, and the timing, for sure. Is Alabama still in play? Yes, Gregory, absolutely. You saw right now the 12Z GFS had Alabama as a landfall site. If we look back at the 12Z GFS, absolutely on the board, sir. Absolutely on the board. Obviously, this is subject to change, but just to give you an idea, you go through the loop, and right there, look at that, Alabama, boom. Seeing a tropical storm, maybe a low-end hurricane, according to the GFS. Obviously, we got to watch, but just letting you know. The girls at work call me the weather girl because I always let them know what is going on with the weather. It's all because of you, David, and Ryan, and other weather guys, meteorologists. Valerie Smith, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that some of our excitement and our passion for atmospheric science is rubbing off on you guys. It's so wonderful. I love it. When I was in vet school, I interned with another vet while going to school so I could practice what I was learning in real time. Absolutely, April. Yep, you know exactly what I'm picking up or what I'm putting down. I was in Wilma last time South Florida got hit. Hate to say, but overdue by now. Johnny, I would agree. I'm very steadfast in my beliefs, or I should say I'm very adamant about my beliefs of the global atmosphere, the global weather pattern acting in a cyclic fashion. Everything comes in cycles. And I feel like we're getting close to where things are going to cycle back through, and we're going to see something in South Florida. Zachary Smith, absolutely. Again, look at the ensembles here. Ensembles, let me go back to our GFS. Look at the GFS ensembles here. North Carolina, the Mid-Atlantic coast are definitely on the board. Look at Debby right now. Debbie's over you guys, headed in right now. So absolutely, we need to be on the ball watching this stuff. Twilight Firefly 100, informative as always. Enjoy the evening, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much for tuning in. And guys, we're going to go ahead and cut the live stream. I am actually starving. I haven't eaten anything since I think around noon today. Self-inflicted. Not looking for any kind of mercy, but I hope you guys understand we're going to kind of do an abrupt outro here. If you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to hit me in the comment section down below. Upon the conclusion of this live stream, I'll happily get back to you like I always do. Feel free to drop me a line on my other social media platforms, X, Instagram, TikTok. Haven't been as active on TikTok recently, to tell you the truth, because TikTok be killing brain cells. I'll scroll through TikTok and immediately I'm like, what am I watching? And I'll just swipe off. So I do apologize. I haven't been as active on TikTok. I probably need to at this point because of the following on there regardless, just not browsing. But either way, feel free to drop me a line, leave me a comment, question, or concern, whatever it is that you desire, and I'll make sure to open that line of communication with you as I always intentionally do. You've been a wonderful audience this Wednesday evening. I hope you guys have been having a solid week so far. We have a weekend coming in hot. We're already looking at 9 p.m., the end of the day on Wednesday. Tomorrow is Friday Eve. So hopefully we can ring on or ring in this weekend on a much higher note in between tropical cyclones. We got Debby hopefully kicking up and out of here, headed through the northeast as we get into Friday, Saturday, and then as we go into this weekend and next week, Lord willing, we are on a bit more of a peaceful note as we probably start tracking a lot more signals. Just to tell you the truth, guys, we're looking pretty sporty in terms of our models, our ensembles right now, but I feel like as we get close to the 13th to the 15th of August, we're really going to start seeing some bona fide signals. So stay tuned. Definitely make sure you are subscribed. Turn the notifications on so you don't miss a future update. Even if YouTube is a little slow providing that notification to you, feel free to watch it on repeat after the fact. It would genuinely mean a lot. I love you guys just the same. If you drop me a comment watching after we've concluded a live discussion, or if you tuned in for the live discussion, regardless, it means the same to me, and I love the support. I thank you guys for it very much so. Would you be willing to set up a community site where we can all chat and ask questions? I'd love that, as a matter of fact. I'm not very tech savvy, but I'd love to open up a forum or a members-only chat. And when I say members, I just mean members of the web page, not actually like paying for memberships or anything like that. But I would love that. If anybody out there has any good website building or web page building expertise, please feel free to hit me up. Or if we want to create like a chat group or something like that out there on a forum, more than happy to do that as well. I think that'd be very beneficial so we can share internal dialogue and not have to worry about things going out to the World Wide Web where we can get roasted or something like that. How much time do we have before we have to worry about these storms again? I would say probably a solid 5 to 7 days. Much less for the Caribbean, unfortunately. If I have friends out there watching in the Lesser Antilles, Trinidad, Tobago, Barbados even, and everybody out there in the Lesser Antilles volcanic island chain, you probably have less. So you guys should be buckling up and already monitoring and maybe even making preparations as we go over the next 5 to 7 days. So, but for us here in the United States, we definitely have a solid little over a week, 7 to 10 days before anything becomes even a remote threat for us here in the mainland U.S. So we'll have to watch and see. And yeah, guys, that's kind of the key takeaway of this live stream. I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday night. Get some rest, get some good food in you, enjoy the rest of the evening. We'll see you again soon. I will not be live tomorrow. I mean, obviously, if things really ramp up, then I will pop live as always, but have a family outing. We're going to be all going to dinner after work concludes and after I punch out for the day, kind of celebrate a little bit that the summer semester's over, got some more credit hours under my belt, and just kind of enjoy the day. So probably won't be live tomorrow, but we'll see you again Friday for sure. So taking a day off, taking a mental break tomorrow, no school, no education, no content. So I'm kind of looking forward to that to let my brain recoup because it looks like I'm going to need it. So we'll definitely see you again on Friday. If you do see a live tomorrow, that's all I'm going to say. But until next time, folks, have a great evening. This is